Okay guys, ngiyathemba niyaphila. Ngizonithatha on part 2 we-vertical projectile motion ama-graphs njengoba benginithembisile. Cela nenze sure ukuthi niyasubscribe ngiyanicela please. Bese niyalike, niyashare futhi ku WhatsApp na ku Facebook noma ikuphi lapha ningashare khona. Ni-comment futhi kwi-video, maybe ningitshele izinto enifuna ngiyi-add or i-chapter enifuna ngiyi-upload next. Ningitshele nokuthi ikuphi lapha engenza khona kabi, ikuphi lapha engenza khona kahle, so that ngizokwazi uku-improve. So ama-graphs kwi-vertical projectile motion awu-3 esikhuluma ngawo, i-acceleration versus time graph, position time graph, and then velocity time graph. Acceleration time graph, remember i-projectile in a constant acceleration, sisho kanjalo. And mathematically, sazi ukuthi a graph of a constant is a horizontal graph, straight line graph. So mabethi into i-constant sazi ukuthi i-straight line esi-horizontal. So i-acceleration yethu throughout the chapter, as long as the object i-projectile, sazi ukuthi ine-acceleration e-constant. So when you think of i-acceleration time graph, cabanga i-graph eyi-horizontal, straight line. I-example nayo object bayayithrowa laphana vertically down from leya ngabe Eiffel Tower ngabe yini. Mabeyithrowa down, mina remember ngithatha u-up as positive, meaning u-A wami u-negative, -9.8. So kwi-diagram yami lapho engithrowa khona i-graph, ngizoba no-negative 9.8 bese ngithrowa i-horizontal line khona lapha ku-negative 9.8. So kusho ukuthi if ubuthatha u-up as negative buzoba no positive 9.8 above ama-x-axis ku-9.8 draw i-horizontal line graph. Nanoma bengathi object is dropped, still nakhona i-acceleration izobe u-9.8 meters per second squared, remember constant. So kuzoba very same graph. Now mabeyiphosa iyaphezulu i-object from point A, njengoba ubona lela bhola lela beliphosa from point A le reach up at maximum height, and then must strike ground, i-ground at C. Into kumele uyi-check-e ukuthi li bounce off immediately yini mal strike i-ground at C noma liyahlala kancane kwi-ground. So if li bounce off immediately kusho ukuthi aliyeki ukuba i-projectile ibhola lethu, meaning i-acceleration at point A, point B, point C kanjalo izolokhu u-9.8 meters per second squared, because isithathu up as positive uzoba negative 9.8 wethu. So igraph yethu izoba kanje, ino negative 9.8 meters per second squared, i-horizontal line, because i-acceleration is constant. Now nayi-ke into kumele uyinake-ke manje, i-object bayayiphosa phezulu from point A and then iye maximum height, mayifika kwi-ground ayisa-bounce off immediately, izothi ukuhlala kancane ibe in contact with i-ground. So if i-object in contact with i-ground for some time, kusho ukuthi kuleso sikhathi sahleli kwi-ground iyayeka ukuba i-projectile, because now sekune-normal force e-actayo and the force of gravity, kanti i-projectile is an object upon which the only force acting is the force of gravity. So at point C i-object ifike iyeke kancane ukuba i-projectile. So if izohlala kwi-ground, if maybe bathi object is in contact with the ground for 0.2 seconds, meaning for 0.2 seconds the object is not a projectile, bese mayisusuka-ke iyaphinde ibe i-projectile. Angazi noma niyayithola leyo nto leyo. So maybe if i-object yethu ithathe 4 seconds ukusuka ku-point A uya ku-point C, kwi-graph yethu right at u-4 seconds ilapho khona ezokhatheka khona igraph, njengoba uyibona ine-gap, izofika ibe ne-gap. So if ihlale 0.2 seconds kusho ukuthi 4.02 seconds ilapho khona igraph esizoqala ihambe-ke ibe horizontal futhi. So kuleya gap kahle kahle i-acceleration ye-graph is 0 eqinisweni, because i-object ihleli lapha kwi-ground. Nenze sure ukuthi niya-understand leyo nto leyo, ningayimisi leyo point leyo. So uyabona ukuthi isikhathi esithathile from beyiphosa to i-ground u-T1, and then isikhathi ezohlala kwi-ground u-T2 minus T1. Isikhathi from beyiphosa to isuka kwi-ground iya up ku-point D u-T2 kanjalo kungayi-understanda. That's it nge-acceleration time graph. I-graph nje a very simple and straightforward. Now masiya kwi-position time graph, i-position ukuthi i-object ngaleso sikhathi leso ikuphi i-position yayo, i-location ngaleso sikhathi. Remember sithethi i-projectile's motion is parabolic masiyi-draw, although kuyi-vertical motion lesikhuluma ngayo, but masiyi-representa in drawing iba parabolic i-motion yethu. I-position time graph ke kumele wazi ukuthi iba in a form of i-parabola. Remember inakhunja acceleration is a constant and the constant is a straight line graph, horizontal straight line graph. Position time graph is a parabolic graph. Uzokhumbula ke ngokuthi u-P from position time graph u-P loya khumbula ukuthi umele u-parabola, and then uzokhumbula ukuthi position time graph is a parabolic graph. With i-position time graph kumele wenze sure ukuthi uyalalela kahle i-statement noma i-instruction mabethi draw i-graph ukuthi bazothi take ground as zero reference. With i-position time graph khona into kumele uyinake, kube very careful mawureda i-instruction abathi kuyo draw i-graph ukuthi bathe take i-ground as zero reference or take i-point of projection as zero reference or as zero of position. Mabethi take ground as zero reference basho ukuthi u-0 meters kumele ebe kwi-ground. So ngizokwenza a few examples on taking ground as zero reference, and then ngenza a few examples on taking i-point of projection as zero of position, and then nizoyithola i-idea ukuthi kahle kahle ngikhuluma ngani. Now i-tennis ball bayayiphosa lapha from i-roof of a 50-meter tall building from point A, and then point B maximum height, point C strike i-ground. Uma draw i-position time graph draw exactly into eyenziwe i-object. I-object isuke ku-point A, which is 50 meters above the ground, meaning 50 meters above 0. And then yaya ku-point B, the maximum height, and then yaya ku-point C, i-ground. So uma draw i-position time graph uzodraw exactly leyo nto leyo. Izoqala lapha ku-point A oku-50 meters, and then ihambe iye phezulu above point A okusho ukuthi height above 50 meters, and then ifike to the highest point bese iyajika maximum height iya kwi-ground exactly le nto yenziwe i-object. So uyabona if uchecka upoint A, B and C on i-diagram yami and check upoint A, B and C on i-graph uyabona ukuthi into efanayo. Ihamba kanjalo ke. Sithathe i-ground as zero reference. Uyambona u-0 meters lapha kwi-origin ulapha ku-point C i-ground. Now baphosa i-basketball from leya wall leya ewu-40 meters i-height yayo from point A leya phezulu liyojika maximum height ku-point B, li-strike i-ground at C bese liya bounce li-reach maximum height for the second time at point D, and then point E li-strike i-ground again. Position time graph ngoba mina ngithatha up as positive, so u40 wami uzoba positive, iqale from u40 ihambe phezulu maximum height ku point B, and then ihambe ku ground at point C, and then point D, and then E, exactly into eyenziwe object. But uma draw i-graph awavezi lawo ma points u B, C, D and E. Ngiyakuvezela ukuthi ukwazi uku-understand ukuthi kwenzakalani. And if uyachecka kahle lapha ku point C uyabona ukuthi isikhathi estrike ngayo i-ground i-basketball yethu nesikhathi ebounce off from i-ground ngaso siyafana. So meaning leya graph leyana, leya object leyana ifike ya bounce off immediately, ayihlalanga kancane kwi-ground. Enye scenario ibhola baliphose from i-roof ewu-15 meters height yakhona, and then labuyela khona futhi kwi-roof aliyanga phansi. If sidrawa i-graph yethu i-position time graph, remember sokwenza exactly into eyenziwe i-object. So i-object isuke from a height of 15 meters yabuyela to a height of 15 meters njengoba ubona lapha kwi-position time graph yethu. I hope ne understand ukuthi kwenzakalani lapha. Now leya tennis ball bathi is dropped noma sithi is thrown downwards. When i-object is dropped or beyiphose phansi, kuyayenza isense ukuthi sithi ngeke ize-reach i-maximum height unless izofika i-bounce i-reach i-maximum height. But noma singayiphosa from lapha kwi-roof iye phansi ifike strike i-ground and then iyahlala, ayi-reachanga at all i-maximum height because masiyiphosa ayiphezulu iyaphansi straight. Nanoma sithi the object is dropped ayiphezulu iyaphansi straight, meaning uyabona kwi-position time graph yethu kuzoba kanjani, izovela ikheve iye phansi ngeke iziye iqale phezulu, meaning reaching a height above 50. Ayikwazi ukureach a height above 50 because ayiphezulu kwe-roof iyaphansi. And then another scenario, basinikeze i-object isuka from a roof, niyalibona ngithi leli bhola leli lisuka kwi-roof bayaliphosa liya phezulu and then li reach maximum height bese lifika liya kwi-ground, lizofika kwi-ground libe in contact with i-floor for some time. So if liba in contact with i-floor, siyavumelana ukuthi now isikhathi ezostrike ngayo i-ground le object lena ngeke size sifane nesikhathi ezosuka ngaso after ukustrike i-ground because izohlala kancane. So kwi-position time graph yami uyabona ukuthi yenze exactly lento eyenzeke kwi-diagram except for ukuthi manje sekune-gap, ifike kwi-ground ngo-T1 yahlala yasuka ngo-T2. So the difference between T1 and T2, mawuthi T2 minus T1 uzothola isikhathi i-object yami esihlalile phansi kwi-ground. Ihamba kanjalo ke, nikhumbuleke if i-object ibe in contact or ayibanga in contact. If ibe in contact kuzoba ne-space, if ingabanga in contact akubi ne-space. Remember even kwi-acceleration time graph that was the case angithi. Now i-tennis ball yethu bayiphosa phezulu bese izofika i-bounce off high kwi-ground but kwi-balcony and then khani yo strike i-ground below i-balcony. So i-bounce yethu kwi-position time graph ayikwazi ukuyoba lapha down ku-0 because ayistrikanga, ayibouncanga off from i-ground, i-bounce off from i-balcony which is a certain height above the ground. So uyayibona ukuthi iyayenza isense igraph yethu kube ukuthi ibe the way ngiyidrawing ngakhona because ibounce kwi-balcony and then khani izoya kwi-ground and akuna gap lapha kwi-balcony, meaning ivele yabounce off immediately kwi-balcony. Now sesifuna ukuthatha i-point of projection as 0 of position, meaning u-0 meters manje uzoba kwi-point of projection. So if i-object bayiphosa from i-roof, u-0 meters akasekho kwi-ground usekwi-roof manje. If bayiphosa from wherever, u-0 meters uzoba from where i-object is being thrown, either up or down. Ihamba kanjalo kuma bethi take i-point of projection as 0 of position. Bajwayele ukuthi i-roof kodwa isikhathi esiningi, but any point of projection kuzobe ku-0 meters kuyo. So if we are notice la mawungathatha igraph yakho mabethi take i-roof as 0 of position, uvele udraw i-Cartesian plane straight laphana kwi-roof, meaning ama-x-axis azoba kwi-roof and then kube nama-y-axis. U-0 meters loya noma u-0 to 0 origin izoba lapha kwi-roof straight. Uyayibona ukuthi igraph iphuma ibe njani, iba snacks nyana but uyayi-understand ukuthi now u-0 meters ulapha exactly kubani kwi-roof. So even na kwi-diagram yethu kuzoba i-same scenario. Now i-object ibisuka from a height of 40. If uya-check-a lapha kwi-diagram yethu, 40 manje akasekho phezulu ku-positive y-axis. Uyayibona ngithi i-building kahle kahle la below u-0 ngokomthetho. So kuzoba u-negative 40 ke i-height yethu kwi-drawing. Taking roof as 0 of position, i-object manje i-ball is thrown from the roof and returned to the roof. Kusho ukuthi u-0 meters uzobe ekwi-roof, iphinde ibuye kubani ku-0 meters futhi khona kwi-roof. So i-position time graph yethu izoba kanje, isuke ku-0 yahamba yojika maximum height and then yabuya yeza kuphi ku-0, of which is the roof because we are taking in i-roof as 0 of position because i-roof now is the point of projection. Ningayenzi ke mistake, nenze sho ukuthi niyalalisisa ukuthi bathi take ground as 0 reference or take the point of projection as 0 of position. Naye enye scenario, i-object yethu is thrown vertically upwards from a 10-meter tall building. Uyayibona i-basketball leya. So izohamba maximum height because bayiphosa phezulu and then ibuye strike ground. And then ihambe maximum height for the second time ibuyele kwi-ground futhi for the second time. Taking i-roof as 0 of position, meaning u-0 meters kumele ebe kwi-roof. Sizoyiqala ku-0 is to 0 lapha kwi-graph yethu, sikhuphuke naye maximum height, ibuyele ku-0 angithi, and then iyaphansi-ke kwi-ground, ifike strike ingahlali. Because if we check, angithi uyayibo i-graph yami, meaning ifike yabounce off immediately because there's no gap lapha between isikhathi sokustrike i-ground nesikhathi ezosuka ngayo i-object from i-ground. Ihamba kanjalo uma bethi take roof as 0 of position or take point of projection as 0 of position. Now if singa-interpreta le graph le engiyidrawile ye-position versus time, uyabona ukuthi i-scenario is that i-object is thrown from maybe a building, i-height yakhona u-A, kusho ukuthi ukuze sazi ukuthi ibe thrown from i-building ewubani meters tall bese sothatha inumber elapha ku-A. And then if usichecka from u-A, object yethu ayanga phansi iqale yaya phezulu, meaning le object bebeyithrow vertically upwards from point A. U-B is the maximum height reached by an object above the ground. If sifuna thina i-maximum height reached by an object, kusho ukuthi sothi leya value ek-B minus i-value ek-A, sizothola i-maximum height reached by an object. But i-maximum height reached by an object above the ground, u-B straight, sithatha leya value ek-B. Now, isikhathi from beyithrowa i-object to reach i-maximum height u-time T1. Isikhathi from beyithrowa i-object to return to point A u-time T2. So, isikhathi from u-O to T1 isiyafana nesikhathi from T1 to T2 if you notice. And then isikhathi esiwu-T3 isikhathi from i-object beyithrowa from point A to i-object istriker i-ground, the time of the entire motion. So ungayenzi i-mistake, uyi-understand lento le ukwazi uku-interpret i-graph ngendlela efanele because bengangakunikeza u-T1 for example, bekunikeza u-T2 and then bebuza isikhathi sokuya maximum height from point A, sekuzomele wazi ukuthi is T2 divided by 2 uyayithola. Enye graph esingayi-interpreta, uyabona ukuthi leya object is thrown vertically upwards from point A, so i-height ye-building u-point A, yahamba ya e-maximum height ku-point B, yayo strike i-ground ku-T3. So T3 isikhathi from beyiphose i-object till i-striker i-ground. Ku-T4 ulalele kahle u-T4 ukuthi isiphi isikhathi. U-T4 isikhathi from beyithrowa i-object till i-bouncer off from i-ground. Mawuthi T4 minus T3 uzothola isikhathi esihlalwe i-object kwi-ground because there was time of contact between i-object ne-ground. Angithi uyabona. Another thing, njengoba silokhu sithi kune time of contact between objects ne-ground, kusho ukuthi ungakwazi ucalculate i-impulse on the object noma ucalculate the force exerted by the floor on the object or the force exerted by the object on the floor. Neyikhumbula impulse from momentum. Okay. So if sibuka le motion leni, if suka from point A ya strike ground yahlala kancane ya bounce ya reach maximum height yabuyela phansi. So i-height e-reachwe i-object after the bounce sizoyithola lapha ku-C. Shoot to C, i-height e-reachwe i-object after bouncer. U-B is the maximum height reached by an object above the ground. U-A is the height from which the object is thrown. U-B minus A is the maximum height reached by an object. Just the maximum height reached by an object, the maximum height reached by an object above the ground. And then T1 is cut from when the object is thrown to when the object figure maximum height. And then T2 is cut from the object's bay posa to return to a starting point, meaning point A. T3 is cut from the object's bay posa till strike ground. Ungayenzi mistake. T5 akusona is cut from the object bouncer off to a maximum height for the second time. No. T5 isikhathi from i-object beyiphosa ku-point A up until isi-reach maximum height after i-bounce. Uyayizwa leyo nto? Bona mabefuna isikhathi from i-object mayibounce off from i-ground to i-maximum height uzothi wena T5 minus T4. Angazi noma niyayizwa lento engiyishoyo. Isikhathi from when i-object leave i-ground yaphezulu after the bounce to the maximum height is not T5 but T5 minus T4. And then iziyo strike i-ground for the second time ku T6. So nenze sure ukuthi niyazazi lezi zinto lezi kanje zinganibhayizisi. And then moving on to i-velocity time graph. I-velocity time graph is a straight line graph nayo. But remember, i-projectile's velocity is not constant, meaning i-graph ye-velocity versus time ngeke izibe constant. Angeke kuba ama-straight lines a-horizontal. Although kuba ama-straight lines, but ngeke kuze kuba ama-straight line a-horizontal. Meaning kuzoba ama-straight line aslantile-ke. Angazi noma niyayithola. And ngokwe-maths, remember thina sathi up as positive, kuyayenza isense ukuthi ngidrowe ama-velocity time graph anama-straight lines aslantile, aslante backwards, because i-acceleration yami isuke i-negative if ngithathe mina u-up as positive. And i-straight line esine-negative gradient sislanta backwards. Sizazofika-ke ekutheni kahle kahle i-velocity time graph i-gradient yayo is the acceleration. But for now bamba ukuthi wena i-velocity time graph is straight line graph but hayi straight line horizontal, straight line esislantile. Into ebalekile about i-velocity time graph ukuthi understand ukuthi sikhuluma nge-velocity. Nanoma bi-scenario kwenzakalani kwi-scenario because nina nithi object yaphezulu kusho ukuthi i-graph kumele ikhuphuke. No. Sikhuluma la nge-velocity ye-object, hayi nge-object ukuthi yenzani. Sikhuluma ngokuthi i-velocity ye-object yenzani yona. So i-object manje is thrown vertically upwards from point A reach maximum height ku point B. Point C i-point lapho khona isiqondane no point A, meaning i-velocity ka A ne-velocity ka C ziyalingana. And then u-point D ilapho khona i-object yethu si-strike i-ground. Now uyambona lo ya 45 lo ya meters, akuyona i-velocity 45 meters, ilapho khona i-object abayithrowa khona i-height ye-building. So lo ya 45 awukwazi kuba nayo kwi-velocity time graph because asikhulumi nge-position, sikhuluma nge-velocity. Bamba ukuthi kwi-velocity if i-object iyaphezulu kwenzakalani nge-velocity. Niyakhumbula ngithi if awukhumbuli ibuyela ku part 1 wale video le. If iyaphezulu i-object i-velocity ya decrease, meaning now uyabo sengithrow i-graph yami i-velocity time graph izoqala ku point A. U-A wami the velocity at A uzoba positive because ngithatha up as positive and the object is going up. Remember iqala up here ku point B, the maximum height. So izoqala ngo positive. From point A to point B kwenzakalani nge-velocity? Oh, object here up, meaning i-velocity here decrease. I decrease phela from point A sifuna ukuyibona izi-reacha u-0 because at the maximum height i-velocity u-0. So kuzoba i-straight line esislante backwards kanje, izosuka lapha ku point A yehle i-velocity yehle izifike kubani ku-0. So ku-0 laphana on the x-axis kusho ukuthi si at the maximum height because on the x-axis i-x-intercept ye-graph yethu u-y wakhona u-0, the velocity u-0. So u-b loya. Isishintsha i-direction manje uyabona isizoya on the negative side, meaning isiya phansi manje from point B ya ku-C and D. Iyahamba kwenzakalani nge-velocity? Never mind ama-negative. Ama-negative kwi-science asho the direction not the magnitude. So ungasho ukuthi wena u-negative 3 muncane nje kuno-negative 1. Asikhulumi ngo-negative as njengoba sikhuluma ngabo kwi-maths, sikhuluma ngo-negative la or specify direction. So it's negative 1, negative 2, negative 3 kusho ukuthi 1, 2, 3 kahle kahle in the opposite direction. Isiya from B to D isiya increase ini i-velocity. Sibona ngani because lapha kuno negative 1 2 3 4 5 6 mhlambe ku-D ngaze kube mhlambe u6 kanje for example. Dokumele uyinotice ukuthi i-velocity at A incane kune-velocity at D. Remember i-velocity at A ilingana ne-velocity at C. So obviously ke i-velocity at D izobe isinkulu kune-velocity at C because the object is going down, i-velocity iya increase. So i-line kwi-graph yami, i-velocity time graph yami, u-line AB kumele ebe shorter than u-line BD. If i-object yethu maybe bayiphose from i-roof yabuya kwi-roof, u-AB bekuzomele ilingane no-AC or AD if maybe bekuzobe ku-D ukureturna to i-roof. Nizowabona kodwa mangilokhu ngiqhubeka nama-examples in understand, but if I understand ungayipause i-video, ucommente, uthathe inamba yami ungu-WhatsApp if kumele wenze kanjalo. Now bathi the object is dropped and esikhuluma nge-velocity, khona into esiyaziyo nge-velocity ye-object mabethi object is dropped. Sazi ukuthi i-velocity yayo u-0, the initial velocity when the object is dropped. And i-velocity iu-0 lapha kwi-origin. So angizu kuyiqala le object le anywhere ngaphandle kokuthi ngiyiqale ku-0 and 0 because mabeqala beyidropa isikhathi bekusase u-0. Time of motion bekusase u-0 and the velocity because the object is dropped u-0 nayo. So kuyayenza isense ukuthi igraph yami iqale ku-0 is to 0 i-coordinates lapha kwi-origin ngokwe-Cartesian plane, kuyayenza isense. And njengoba mina ngithatha u-up as positive, i-object yami iyaphansi, meaning igraph yami ngifuna ukuyibona iqala ku-0. The reason is because i-object is dropped bese ngiyibona iya ku-negative side of i-velocity because i-object yami iyaphansi and mina ngithatha u-up as positive. Kusho ukuthi uma iyaphansi iya kuma-velocity a-negative kwi-opposite direction. Ihambe-ke iziyostrika i-ground kulesiya sikhathi lesiya u-T. Isikhathi leso from i-object beyithrowa till istrika i-ground. Angazi noma iyayenza isense leyo nto leyo, but hamba nami uzoyibona ekugcineni izoyenza isense. Now i-object ayisekho dropped, isi-thrown vertically downwards, kusho ukuthi iya ko-negative, and njengoba i-thrown vertically down, the initial velocity is negative. So sifuna ukuyibona iqala igraph yethu ku-negative side of ama-axes, ama-y-axes. The initial velocity A wethu uzobe negative, ihambe iye phansi, kusho ukuthi kwenzakalani nge-velocity ya increase from say iqale ku-negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6 iya increase. Remember negative asimind usho i-direction u-negative, so kufanele ukuthi izothi 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 but in the negative side because iya down. So izo-reach u-point B nge-velocity e-negative. Ku-time kuzobe ku-T isikhathi sethu. Udinga ukupay attention kakhulu ke manje. Object iyabounce off mayifika ku-ground but ibounce off immediately. Into engiyaziyo mina ukuthi okay, i-object njengoba iqala ku-point A iya up, kusho ukuthi i-velocity i-positive the initial at point A. Njengoba iya up ku-point B meaning izoya kwi-maximum height. So from point A the positive velocity, so ibona i-velocity decrease, maybe sithi u-4 A velocity yakhona 4 meters per second. So 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ngiyayibona isifika lapha ku-0 the x-intercept leyo kuqala u-point B, i-maximum height le. And then from i-maximum height i-object yenze njani? Iya kwi-opposite direction, meaning isiya kwi-negative side of ama-axes. Kwenzakalani nge-velocity? Iya increase from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 but in the opposite side. Izifike ku-point C. U-point C ilapho khona striker khona i-ground. Immediately mayifika ku-point C yasuka futhi D. Into engizama ukukuvezela yona lapha njengoba ngithe C ngathi D kwi-point eli-1 ngoba mayifika kwi-ground if izobounce off immediately kusho ukuthi into kumele uyazi a very important thing ukuthi if i-striker off immediately i-velocity efike ngayo strike ngayo ground, meaning i-velocity at C, the negative velocity at C, izofana ne-velocity bounce off from i-ground ngayo, the velocity at D, but isi-positive. Because my bounce, ibikade yaphansi, ya-strike ku-C, iyaphansi. And then there's a sudden change in direction, isiyaphezulu, fast nakhona. Kusho ukuthi, ibikade negative, u-C, isi-positive, u-D, ihamba kanjalo. So i-bounce siyirepresenta ngama-dotted lines. Njengobona the vertical dotted lines asho ukuthi kube ne-bounce la. And njengoba e-vertical azama ukusho ukuthi lento le i-bounce off immediately ayihlalanga, meaning uthi wami loya isikhathi i-object efike ngaso uthi 2 futhi isikhathi esisuke ngaso kuyo iground, meaning isikhathi sika C nesikhathi sika D siyafana. Angazi noma niya understand leyo nto le. And then from into enza ukuthi ama velocity efane ku C na ku D ingoba i-object ayiluzanga i-kinetic energy, ayihlalanga kancane kwi-ground, ivele yabounce off immediately. So if ihlalile kancane bizoluza some of its velocity ngoba iyahlala, meaning lose kinetic energy, ayisekho kwi-motion. Then mayisisuka isine-kinetic energy encane, meaning i-velocity encane. So ku point D ilapho khona i-object isisuka iya kuphi iya phezulu, and if iya phezulu objects, remember velocity ya decrease, kuyayenza isense ukuthi from laphana maybe uD asithi 7 meters per second, uyabona izothi 7 6 5 4 3 2 1 0 ku E sesiku 0, the maximum height. And then from E to F isishintsha direction iyaphansi manje, the negative side, and then ihamba kanjalo. Angazi noma niyayithola. Okay, now i-object is in contact with the floor for some time. Isuka i-object from i-building ku point A iya phezulu ku point B, and then ibuyele phansi ku C isuke ngo D. Now i-velocity at C ayisafani ne-velocity at D because i-object mayifika ngo C izohlala kancane, ilose kinetic energy while in contact, and then mayisuka ngo D isizobe sine-velocity encane than le eka C. And then bounce iya phezulu ku point D, and then ibuyele ku F. So uyabona ukuthi manje isikhathi ku C u-T2 asafani nesikhathi ku D u-T3. Even i-dotted line yami representa i-bounce manje isislante forward kancane, ayisekho vertical, meaning isikhathi at D asafani nesikhathi at C. So njengoba kungafani isikhathi at D nesikhathi at C, kusho ukuthi ne-velocity at C ayifani ne-velocity at D. Ihamba kanjalo ke. Okay, masinga-interpreta maybe velocity time graph noma u-1 noma u-2 angazi. Mawubuka leya scenario leya, sithatha u-up as positive njengoba nginitshela ukuthi ngihlale ngithatha u-up as positive mina. I-object yami ngichecka mina i-velocity lapha ku-0, kuma-y-axis is the initial velocity. So ku-A. U-A wami u-negative, meaning the initial velocity is negative. And uma ngichecka from u-A iya ku-B kwenzakalani nge-velocity? Iya increase because u-A ngaba u-2, B kuba u-6, meaning i-increasile. So i-object kusho ukuthi bayiphose phansi vertically down, the object was thrown vertically down. Mayifika i-strike ground, i-velocity yakhona u-B mayi-strike ground, kuba ne-bounce because there's a sudden change manje in direction. Ngibona ngani? Ngibona i-velocity athi ku-B khona lapha esi-C futhi, and u-B is the negative velocity, u-C is the positive velocity. So suddenly ishintshile from u-B to C, meaning i-bounce leyo. Kwenzakalani nge-velocity ke from C to D iya decrease, meaning iya up i-object ize reach D the maximum height for the first time. So i-object bayiphose phansi yafika ya strike i-ground, ya bounce from i-ground, and then iya phezulu ya reach maximum height to D, and then yashintsha direction ya phansi iya ku E. So mayifika ku E i-object yami isizofika futhi ifika i-bounce lapha ngoba ngiyabona there's a sudden change in direction again. My bouncer izosuka ngo F ku ground positive ya up is reach maximum height ku G. So u G i-object yethu kahle kahle bayiphose down ya bounce ka u2, and then okwesi3 bayibambe maximum height. After the second bounce bayibambe maximum height, ayikwazanga ukubuyela phansi ku ground again. Angazi noma niyayibona leyo nto leyo. Ungayibhayizisi if you check u line BC, i-line indicator i-bounce, and line EF, i-line indicator i-bounce. Mawacheka lama lines lawa uwabona ngathi a-vertical, ungayenzi conclusion yokuthi kusho ukuthi there was no time of contact, meaning i-object bounce off immediately. Wena kumele uconfirme ngezinto eziwu2, uzoconfirma ngama lines being vertical, and then uconfirme nge-velocity at B and velocity at C. Kungenzeka beyidrowe i-line ibukeke ngathi i-vertical, but mawucheck i-velocity at B and velocity at C ayifani. So ngeke uzukwazi ke ukuthi wena le object bounce off immediately, because if bounce off immediately velocity ka B ne velocity ka C imust ukuthi zifane na EF kanjalo ke. So confirma ngezinto eziyi-2 if uanalyze igraph. Analyze igraph uzo-check i-velocity ka-B neka-C ukuthi ziyafana yini. Check i-vertical line, but into kakhulu okumele uyi-check i-velocity ka-B ne-velocity ka-C. Ngicabanga ukuthi niyangi-understand ukuthi ngizama ukuthini. Enye into okumele uyazi ukuthi i-area between the graph and the horizontal x-axis irepresenta a physical quantity. Angikhulumi nge-vertical projectile motion kuphela. Any chapter kwi-physics, i-graph, i-area between the graph and the horizontal axis, x-axis, leyo area leyo irepresenta a physical quantity. So in this case, i-physical quantity representwa i-area between the graph and the x-axis, ngikhuluma nge-velocity time graph njengamanje, i-height noma i-displacement. So kuzodependa ukuthi ukhuluma ngayiphi area, uzokwazi lapho ukuthi okusho ukuthi i-height yiphi noma i-displacement yiphi. And then enye into okumele uyazi, i-gradient of the graph nayo futhi represents i-physical quantity kunoma yiphi i-graph kwi-physics. So kwi-velocity time graph i-gradient yakhona represents i-acceleration, but already siyazi ukuthi i-acceleration yethu u-negative 9.8 meters per second squared downwards direction. Naye into ibaluleke kakhulu. Ma ucalculate u-delta y kule scenario le, ibhola likwi-roof and then liyahamba liyaphezulu from point A, point B is the maximum height, li-strike ground ku-point D, and then likhuphuke le-maximum height for the second time, u-E. Ma ucalculate u-delta y of the entire motion of leliya bhola leliyana, uyazi ukuthi kuzoba u-delta y meaning from point A to point E, kahle, because that's the entire motion of ibhola. But siyazi ukuthi u-delta y from A to B uyafana no-delta y from B to C in the opposite direction, meaning bazokhanselana. So if usithatha u-delta y from A to D, sizothola ukuthi u-CD eqinisweni. So if bekumele sicalculate u-delta y of the entire motion, bese ngakwazi ukuthatha u-delta y CD ozobe negative plus delta y DE ozobe positive, and then isithola u-delta y of the entire motion ngoku-add abo delta y. But omunye ebengathini, remember ngithe mina kumele uyibuze ukuthi okay, information enginayo eyakuphi nakuphi ukuze ngizocalculate into yakhona. So mina ngifuna ucalculate u-delta y from A to E. That's the delta y for the entire motion, u-delta y from A to E. If nginayo i-velocity ka-A ne-velocity ka-E, ngingakwazi ukusebenzisa iformula elithi VF squared equals to VI squared plus 2A delta y. Ngithola u-delta y from A to E. Because the final velocity, the velocity at E is 0. Remember, E is the maximum height. Velocity at A bazobe benginikezile yona. Acceleration negative 9.8. So the unknown kuzobe ku delta y. Ngingakwazi ukumcalculate. But the problem is that mawubuka le diagram yami elandelayo with ukwenza lento engishoyo ukuthatha velocity at A and velocity at E. Buka le diagram le elandelayo njengamanje. Ukuthi i-object mabe iphosa iyaphezulu ifike strike ground and then ibounce, awu-2 ama-scenario. It's either during the bounce izofike ibe in contact ne-floor for some time or izobounce off immediately. So if i-object ibounce off immediately, the object is most likely to reach a height higher than when the object ingabouncanga off immediately, because if iba in contact ne-ground for some time it lose kinetic energy, meaning ngeke isakwazi ukureach height enkulu, izobe siphelelwe i-energy because ithe ukuhlala kancane lapha. So uyabona if uchecka le diagram yami lena, i-basketball isuka ku-A ya ku-B, i-strike ground at C, and then if i-object ifike yaba in contact izokwazi ukureach point D. if ingabanga in contact izo reacha upoint E kuyayenza sense kanjalo. Buka-ke problem manje. Umfundi ufuna ukucalculate delta y of the entire motion. So that is the delta y from either A to D or A to E depending ukuthi ifike yahlala noma ayihlalanga ngithi. So if umfundi ethatha i-velocity at A and velocity at D to calculate delta y, kuyafana nokuthi uthathe i-velocity at A and velocity at E to calculate delta y. Because the velocity at A if ku-5, i-velocity at D is 0 and i-velocity at E is also 0. Niyayibona leyo nto leyo. But iqiniso ukuthi ngeke labo bantu labo bethola udelta y ofanayo. Udelta y from A to D awufani no delta y from A to E because u-D ipoint eliphansi kuno E. So ngaleyo ndlela i-advice yami ukuthini ukuthi mawucalculate udelta y for the entire motion if kube ne-bounce ungacalculate ngendlela yokuthi uthathe i-velocity at A ne-velocity at E or i-velocity at A ne-velocity at D. Thatha wena udelta y from A to C bese uthatha udelta y from C to D or from C to E. Lapho uzothola i-answer right because mayihlala phansi I understand lento engisho ngalokho ngichaza into eningi but into very deep and very important okumele uyi-understand. Sengikhulume kakhulu manje ngisathanda subscriber niyalakha niyashare nisharele wonke umuntu eningakwazi ukumsharela so that nonke nizosizakala niphase. Ni comment and like eningitshela ukuthi ngifuna ngiposte i-video yayiphi chapter noma yini enifuna ngiyiposte. Manifuna ukungincoma ningincome futhi if sikhona isidingo. Ngiyabonga.